Hello and welcome to Recruiting is No Joke. I am your host, Joe Laugi, the realist recruiter. I got the sign. Nobody can steal it from me. But I am super excited today, guys. We have someone who, man, I feel like we're friends. He's like kind of mentor, colleague, someone I look up to as a content creator and a recruiter. I am delighted today to have Mike Peditto, who is director of talent at Teal, but also just comes with a ton of internal recruitment experience, agency recruitment experience, just an all-around recruiting pro. And he is also, if you follow him on social media, he is the realistic recruiter. And honestly, I cannot be more excited to have somebody on the podcast because I just feel like not only has Mike created a ton of really, really helpful content for job seekers, offline, he is just one of the most down to earth, genuine guys that you'll ever meet. And it's been really exciting to kind of watch his journey on social media, watch his journey like professionally, and just to see, somebody who's making content that's not clickbait, someone making content that's just authentic, do really, really well. So Mike, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. What did I miss? Did I miss anything in that introduction?
Oh, I don't know. That was a lot. I feel like I should just let you talk about me for a really long time. And it's like, what else do you like about me? You missed my name. It's Mike Peditto, but that's okay. Everyone says Peditto. It's okay. But, we've had enough fun on our podcast with your name, so I suppose it's fair enough. But yeah, no, I am the realistic recruiter. I always tell this story, and I feel like people don't believe it, but it's true. I had never heard of Joel when I set my name. I didn't get into any of this to be a content creator. One day I just started making a TikTok and I was like, man, there's a lot of not realistic advice and people always say I'm realistic. So I was the realistic recruiter. And Joel was like the second person to pop on my page. Like TikTok was like, okay, like here's what you're into. And I saw this video. I was just like, shoot. And I think I left a comment that's just like, hey man, I didn't mean to rip you off. Like, I hope it's okay. It's just like, that was just like, I didn't want to make trouble.
I think when I first saw the screen name, I was like, oh man, this is kind of close to home. But then, it's like I said, I consume your content. And funnily enough, when I started creating content big on TikTok a couple of years ago, I really defaulted to kind of how a lot of my content is on social media, like short memes, like funny, sometimes a little bit of clickbait. And I don't think the clickbait will ever go away. But one of the things I noticed about your content that I learned a ton from was just the fact that you were able to talk straight into the camera and really just deliver like authentic advice and like helpful advice to people. And since watching you do what you do, I started to actually take on more of that video as well and do that. So you actually inspired me a lot with your content, which I think I've told you before, but I want all my listeners, all 2 people out there listening to know this.
Yeah.
But you also host a podcast too. So tell us about the podcast that you guys host as well.
I do. I host the Corporate Pizza Party podcast with my friends Dan Space, who you may know as Dan from HR. And depending, if you're listening to this, you probably know Dan from HR, and Farah Shargi, who's another content creator, and his amazing resume of recruiting work at Google and TikTok and Uber and New York Times. And it's the 3 of us really sort of just talking behind the scenes of corporate a lot, right? 2 recruiters, one tons of big company experience, one startup experience. Dan has been an HR business partner at huge companies like Spotify and EA. And we just got together one day after all of us had been laid off and decided we'd start talking about what goes on behind the scenes with a lot of this stuff. And some episodes are very action-based, job search focused, resume tips and job searching tips. Some we just take some silly LinkedIn influencers to town and have a great time making fun of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just rant and ramble. We have a lot of fun. We have maybe a triple-digit listener base, and it's a fun time poking fun at the idea of a corporate pizza party.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. I think what I love most about like the group specifically is like all of you guys are like very hard hitting with your content and really don't hold back the punches, which I think again that we were talking about this offline. It's like there can be a culture with content where there's just so much pressure to get likes and views and all this sort of stuff that a lot of times people bend to that. And even if they genuinely actually have really great advice offline, and when you talk to them offline, sometimes the online advice is a little vanilla there. And I'm talking to someone who is guilty at times of that. But I will say, this is why I do the podcast. This is why I do a lot of video content, because the more video content you do, the longer form content you do, you actually really get to put out like a full perspective of things. So, as always on this podcast, we're going to look at some interesting takes that we've seen on LinkedIn.
My
And
favorite.
yeah, and I will say this is one of the episodes where I usually task my guests with bringing stuff, and no one ever does. But Mike is the one guy who's come through and been like, you know what, I actually got some stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
So,
hold on. Let me open my bookmarks tab where I have 1,000 things here ready to make fun of.
yes, so we're gonna look at, first of all, this is the post that I ran across. Let me see if I can find it here. Great. They both have the same. Okay, here it is. All right. So, sometimes I hide the name of people, but I'm not going to hide Steve's name here. And in fact, Steve might actually be coming on the podcast here in a couple of weeks. So, Steven Rothberg, who I believe is like he was chief visionary officer, founder of a company called College Recruiting, I think is what it is, or College Recruiters. He posted this, and for anyone who can't see out there, basically the post reads, yes, Virginia, you like the English accent coming out? Virginia. ATS do reject candidates based on the keywords in their resume. There's so many things in life that I wish weren't true. Some of them used to not be true and still aren't, such as the concept of the world is flat. I get that some are flat earthers who literally believe the world is flat, but let's deal in realities. There are also things that used to not be true, but now are. Until gunpowder was discovered, it was true that weapons such as cannon and rifles were impossible. Until the Wright brothers flew, it was true that powered flight was impossible. Until Neil Armstrong, blah, 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 blah. And then he ends it with saying, and until applicant tracking systems, or ATS, started to use technology that ranked applicants, it was true that candidates could not correctly complain that their applications were rejected by an ATS. And then he has an article linked to it. So basically, for anyone who kind of lost track of that, it's basically saying that now there's technology with some ATSs that can like kind of stack rank candidates based on keywords or whatever kind of prior parameters the recruiter or hiring team puts in place. Thus, now the ATS can reject people if you're looking at that. Now, guys, to give some other context, this post ended up getting 17 likes, but 191 comments. And anytime you see a post that has this many comments with this few amount of likes, man, you know that people are getting mad in the comments. And when I look at the people who are commenting on here, so if anyone who can't see, some people have some familiar faces here in the comments. So if I go down, Jason Fritz is in there, Kristen Fife, if you follow Kristen. And then there's one person that we all recognize in here. I don't know how far I'm going to have to go down to find this.
She's right at the top for me. I know you're looking.
Oh, she's right. Yeah. We're talking about the one and only Amy Miller, who I think started this whole thing. So I'm not going to go and read all these comments. I'll put the post link to these comments. But I started thinking about this recently. And I started thinking, because it's actually illegal for the technology to make the decision, right? It's like illegal for AI to make a hiring decision. Like that is illegal. I actually started wondering, like, at what point do we say that AI is making the decision? And it does actually stack ranking candidates. Does that count as like partially making the decision? So, Mike, I'd be curious, like, what's your whole take on this?
Yeah, so I'm like, this is starting to become more nuanced. The legal thing you're talking about, right, is that any company has to follow OFCCP compliance laws. There's a rule that a human has to review every resume. And a lot of companies have to follow those laws. Where I work, we don't provide anything to the government in general. But yeah, and it gets into the comments in this. There are some ATS systems now that can provide ratings and rankings based on how well things match up. That is the end of where it comes in. At the end of the day, a person still has to go through and sort of hit the button, open it, decide what to do. And I can hear the counter argument, right? The counter argument to this is, yeah, but if you're a busy recruiter and you have 300 applicants and your system says, well, these 100 are terrible, we ranked them a 0. Yeah. It's essentially rejecting them, even if it's not hitting the reject button. And there is some validity to that. But my response is also good resumes and good candidates and people who are qualified for the job aren't getting ranked 0, right? I just think like even in that world, it doesn't work that way. And recruiters still open these up and look at them because these ratings don't mean a ton. Because this is why things like if you were to try and hide text in a white font and put on your resume. Like you can
Yeah.
do that. And if one of these systems, which again is less of the systems do this than the ones who don't. But even the ones that do, right? So they rank you 100% because you copied the whole job description in. I'm still a human with free will. And I'm going to open up the resume and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to see that you're not qualified for this job.
Yeah.
And then I'm not going to interview you. So like these ratings really don't mean anything. And I've heard
you're gonna look at it and you're gonna actually have the screening call, and then when you have the screening call, you're gonna realize like actually this person is just lying on their resume or whatever.
Well, I think that's the goal for people. So I think that is their end goal. So I don't even want to like because you'll lie your way in, you'll trick whatever. Like I think the response to that, like, well, it's better than getting no interview. So I do see that. But the reality is I'm going to not see any of the stuff on your resume. It's not if my ATS system says this person's 100, we ranked them at the top, like my hands are behind my back now and I have to do an interview with you, right? I can just like not. And I can see that your resume isn't qualified and I'll pretty much get what happened anyway. Now, I don't work in an ATS system that rates, so I'm talking hypothetically here. Like I don't deal with any of this in my job.
What ATS do you use, just out of curiosity?
So we recently switched to Ashby, which I am a huge fan of. Shout out to Ashby. And
Shout out to Ashby. Shannon over at Ashby, one of my favorites.
Yeah, Shannon's great. The Ashby team is amazing. I actually met with another startup recently to help them sort of like decide they should move to Ashby. And the Ashby team sent me a box of cookies. It was very nice of them.
I thought you were going to say they sent me a box of commission.
Yeah, I should. I don't care about the cookies. Just send me a cut of what they pay you for the ATS.
I want equity in the company.
I do want equity in Ashby.
Okay. So you're using it. Okay. So here's one of my thoughts with this. Like, let's say you're sourcing for candidates. Well, I guess sourcing for candidates would be different, right? But my argument was going to be like, what if you're sourcing for candidates and you search on LinkedIn and then LinkedIn, sends you the top 100 people that match based on the search that you do. Like how, but again, we're talking about applicants versus like proactively sourcing. So that argument kind of falls apart. My other thought with this is like, people understand, right, that like as a recruiter, like our job is to get hiring managers the candidates that they're interested in. So like what recruiter in their right mind would ever send somebody through blindly without like vetting the person?
Yeah. And I think people are more concerned about getting rejected blindly. And it's a recruiter's job to open it up and look at it. Can I say every recruiter does? Of course not. But right, that could happen with or without the ranking system, even beginning with as well. But the thing I sort of consistently come back to when people have this argument is the response, or the thing people will say is, I built like the perfect resume. I optimized for every keyword, every buzzword, and I'm getting rejected by the AI. That doesn't make any sense, because if it was that world where the AI was just only scoring off of all the buzzwords and keywords and all that stuff,
you get the job.
You got it. You're 100%. Like you're getting the interview. You're moving forward. It's almost to me like that's the proof that at some point human is coming into that and like messing up that algorithm that you think you're gaming. If it was just that algorithm and you know how to beat it, why aren't you beating it? It's because that's not what's happening.
That's so true. And I think like, what's also interesting to me with this is, it's like not every ATS even has that scoring system.
Yeah.
If they do have some sort of scoring system, you still haven't vet it. I'm also curious, what's your take on these AI screening tools? Like, I'm not sure if you saw one of my posts this week, but I did a sponsored post for one of my clients, a company. I'm not going to say the name on the podcast, but basically what this company does, they have a tool which will do an AI screening call. And basically, most recruiters I talk to initially are like, I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we look at it and go, well, all 300 applicants now are guaranteed a screening call. And then looking at the resume and then the the answers and the questions, that they're looking at both what came from the screening call and the resume. And according to them, they've had an 80% like actual completion. And these are for corporate jobs. We're not talking high volume. We're talking corporate jobs. An 80% completion. And they said that several of their clients have actually come back and said, we ended up hiring people that we wouldn't have hired based on their resume. So thought on a technology like that, like good thing, bad thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. My instinct is always to say I don't like that. And is it partially because is it partially
recruiter? That's why.
Yeah. Is it something that could replace me? But also, I think there's a human element to this. Now, I assume there's more human elements throughout. So, is this any different than searching for keywords or putting application questions in where they have to type your answer and scoring candidates based on that or all these other things? Like, I suppose not in theory. To me, why I don't like it is my one of my biggest strengths for both internal and like working with a candidate is like matching up people to sort of like what makes sense. I know what a hiring manager really wants. I know the kind of things that are going to work for them, the people that are going to work for them, things like that. I also want a candidate to feel comfortable moving forward with us. I spend a ton of time on my interviews really making candidates understand us and the role, the pros and the cons, and what's going to work out here and what's not going to work here, all that stuff. And I understand every recruiter doesn't do that. So I think that is a great tool to replace like bare minimum recruiters, like just sort of like getting this bar recruiters. They have a basic screen, checking box recruiters,
Yeah,
sure.
it's well that I mean, this is not a tool that's gonna replace like a hiring manager in-depth screening call. This is literally, that 10 to 15-minute screening call
Right.
that, a decent amount of recruiters will do just to vet, just to make sure, okay, hey, you're qualified, you're interested, and you're affordable, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, do you have the basic qualifications? One of the big complaints, which I know you get, I get, anyone who's creating content as a recruiter gets, is people are just so sick of applying to a job and hitting a black hole.
Hmm.
So if you had the ability then to go, hey, I'm just gonna schedule my screening call right now.
Hmm.
To me, another problem that we see, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, is like companies seem to really value like how many applicants they get, but it's just such a dumb metric to even care about. Like, who cares if you get 1,000 applicants? Like, what's the quality of the applicants? So maybe that would sort of temper that. Like, would you apply to a job if you knew you were guaranteed to do a screening call and you're not qualified for the job?
Yeah, that part's interesting, right? Because I like the idea of everybody getting like a shot. And if it does something like that, part of me thinks like it just sort of moves you into the same spot you were in anyway, which is like, okay, now we have our however many best people and we're going to have a human interview with them. And I just feel like that's where I'd have gotten us to, even without that first step, regardless. But now a bunch of people who like didn't get the job anyway got to do an extra phone screen with AI, I guess. But if you have clients saying they got different people than they would have moved forward, then that proves me wrong that like others did move
Well,
in.
and
So
just to say, that's what they said. I don't have
sure.
like necessarily proof of that outside of
Yeah.
the word, like their word for that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. Like I've never used them. And I can't see like where I work us using them. I just think like we're too small. It doesn't make sense. But like I can see the case for them other places. And, I think if you give people an option, some will like it and some won't. But we're heading that way, I think, is the more important thing. Like one thing that I think recruiters need to get better at accepting is that like these tools are coming and they are happening. And even if an ATS system right now isn't fully making decisions, and like even if the ranking right now isn't good, it's probably going to get better. It's probably going to
Yeah.
start to get more relied on. More ATS systems are going to come in that do use it and do rank people. And the more companies using it, the more likely it is recruiters trust the rankings. Like, I do think the ball is moving that way. And there are a lot of recruiters just holding on to like, no, absolutely not. That doesn't happen. It's never going to happen. Like, isn't it? Like, I do think we're going that way. And I do think these tools are going to be a thing. And I don't necessarily love it because I think hiring is a human thing. And I don't think people want more machines running it. But yeah, companies are going to roll it out because it's way cheaper than paying recruiters.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And look, I did a poll. I love doing polls. Everyone who follows me knows I love a good old poll. I did a poll on LinkedIn, and this one was for recruiters. And the question was, do you think AI experience will positively impact your career trajectory in recruiting? And the results are always staggering to me. 740 people voted, and 59% of people said yes, but 40% of recruiters said no. And I'm like,
Yeah.
which is crazy to me, man. Like, honestly, I'm like, I'm not saying I'm definitely like, to your point earlier, like the things that you said you were good at, which is like providing great candidate experience and really working with hiring managers and like, creating a positive experience, which I think in some ways working at Teal, which is a great platform, kind of have, right. It'd be weird if you guys had a terrible candidate experience.
Hmm.
But on the whole, I'm like, candidate experience is terrible right now. So like we need to figure out, is there a way to use AI to actually create a better candidate experience so we can focus on those things? Like, because I know some recruiters will like they'll spend hours like sorting through stuff or like clicking buttons doing this. And I'm like, Wouldn't it be better if our time was spent actually like providing great service and providing like a white glove service, right?
Yeah, and that's what's hard is there's no perfect way to do this. This is sort of the debates I have. I honestly think an AI that we could trust to read resumes and say, here are the most qualified people for the job isn't a bad thing necessarily, right? You have to make sure that like it has to be universally known. I think that's the bigger problem with an idea like this is people don't know if it's happening or isn't happening, how it would be scored, how it isn't scored. I think if we ever hit a world where we're like, hey, this is the system that gets used, these are the things it's looking for. This is how it's going to read your resume. Format it this way, make it look this way. And if it has this amount of success, it will get through. I think people can learn to do that. Will they start gaming it, of course, or whatever? But right now, it's this like big unknown, and
Yep.
nobody knows what's happening on the other side. And we're just sort of like assuming the worst and saying whatever. And it's just a big mess.
Yep. No, I couldn't
But
couldn't agree more.
but yeah, we have to
What
learn to adapt and go. Like I use AI in like ways that help me every day. But it's sort of how.
what's your kind of like go-to tool right now?
Right. So even like even within like our ATS, like it's all auto scheduled, all the emails, I have templates of everything ready to go. And the process is so quick of just sort of like I get agendas out and interview questions and everything sent over to somebody and scheduled like one click of a button. And I used to spend so much time scheduling people. Maybe that's not AI, it's some automation. I don't know what we want to call it. Right. Or, I think there's a lot of really good AI sourcing tools and email tools to sort of just get people's info very quickly, get your email and your job description, whatever else over to them and go. Anything that I think is just sort of these like monotonous tasks that are
Yeah.
just like repeatable is easy to put into AI. I mean, I work for a company that uses a ton of AI and we're building a ton of different AI tools and we're doing all of this stuff that kind of the goal is to help people move quicker and spend more time on the stuff that like humans do better. And the best people in this whole AI era are going to be the ones who understand how to use AI well and use it and not just like be scared of it and not rely on it totally. Just like when it comes to resume writing or applications or everything else, right? It's just sort of I can
Content creation.
content creation. I can tell when I get job applications where they like answer the applicant questions like just using ChatGPT. And people say, well, you're an AI company. Like, why should you care? It's just like, I'm okay using AI, but those answers are almost never as good as the people who write the answers.
Well, and it's like fundamentally you want to know like like what your actual experience is or what your actual answer is versus like a right answer. It's like it's not always about the right answer. It's about having like that or like the right quote unquote answer. It's more about like having like the authentic answer to you because that's actually what matters. Like that's what we're trying to vet out. We're actually like trying to figure out what is your actual experience, what are your actual accomplishments, like like what are you good at, rather than just trying to like hit like a laundry list of things. I always equate it to like for a while a lot of the content even for like job seekers was like and when I'm not seeing as much as this now, but it was almost like treating like the job search like a video game or something like, up, up, left, left, right, right, A, B, C,
Right.
and now you get to fight the boss. It's like this is a video game. This is like literally you're trying to figure out like what are you gonna do with your time to get paid, right? That's what a job is.
Yeah.
It's not like this magical thing.
Yeah. There's no formula
So
to this stuff. Like
no,
everything's done different. And yeah, when it comes to like that AI, like we can all tell when stuff's written by AI, it's not as good. We all know that. Everyone knows it.
yeah,
So like when you send answers fully written by AI, like you know that they're not as good. Like you want to show your savviness, use it and then make it better and then do it. And I can tell the people who do that too. And like they tend to do better.
100%. No, I love it. Well, let's talking about content. We got another LinkedIn post, and this one, this one, I don't know how I missed this, but Mike actually sent me this one. And again, I'm not gonna hide the name here. This is Mr. Dan Harper. For anyone who's out there who's listening, so I've got a post from Dan Harper on LinkedIn. Dan Harper, I've never ran into Dan before. He's a LinkedIn top voice, so everything he says is 100% correct.
I don't
Also,
understand how these badges come.
tech career coach at Velocifire, CTO at homes.com AU, which is Australia. So this is Dan's wisdom here. He says, you only need 5 minutes in an interview to know if someone is awesome and worth hiring. You don't need 4 rounds of interviews and several hours of interviews. People who have a growth mindset are continual learners. who care about customers and can solve problems effectively are immediately obvious when they talk about their work. You only need to ask one question in an interview. What have you been working on recently? The answer will usually give you everything you need to know if they're good or not. That wisdom right there.
It was almost, what's annoying is like part of this point is really good, right? You don't need 4+ rounds and several hours of interview. For a lot of roles, you are correct. But I believe there is a middle ground between 5 minutes and 4 hours, somewhere in there that can be helpful. Is that a 5-minute interview totally? Like, do they get to ask questions? Is this interview just you say, what have you been working on recently? And then they say, do you have any hesitations about my candidacy? And then we just go separate ways and maybe I get hired.
That's it. I mean, and let me see where what company. So Dan works for a company. Well, he's a tech career coach and founder at Velocify. So I'm not going to look at that, but let's take a look at homes.com AU, because sometimes you got to get context on this too. And I'm like, so this guy's CTO at a company with 11 to 50 employees on LinkedIn, 615 followers on LinkedIn. And as I go through and look at the people who work here, a lot of them aren't even associated. So I'm actually just wondering at this point, how much hiring is this guy?
No, he doesn't. That's always the case with these people. That's always the case with posts like this, is it's people who just like aren't actually doing this and aren't actually doing any hiring. My favorite comment on this post too is Matt Herndon, who's another LinkedIn top voice, but actually recruits for a living, wrote, "This sounds like unconscious bias to me." And his response was, "It's a conscious bias. I only want to hire awesome people. And the faster, more accurate I can bias myself to identify them, the better."
There it is.
Like awesome is such like a weird word to use. And I do like this question, to be fair. I do think in tech, especially where he's talking about like a good way to get a sense for like, I will ask tech people a lot, like either what have you been working on recently, or tell me about a project you really liked, or what's the last thing you built that you're proud of, like whatever. And you can hear how they talk about it.
And that's a question we should be asking, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, hey, I remember the old like Lou Adler questions, right? Like, what's the accomplishment you're most proud of? And then like you drill down into it, right? You're like, what was your role in the project? How big was the project? What was the scope of the project? I mean, those are great questions, but you're not doing it. No way you're doing it by like as if you're gonna hire like a VP of engineering, a 5-minute interview. Like, hey, tell me what you're working on recently. They tell you, and you're like, yeah, you're hired.
I cannot tell you how many interviews I do where a few minutes in the interview, I think I'm going to pass on the person.
Yeah.
But because I don't think like this, I wind up moving them forward by the end, because you get a quick bias about people right away. You make an assumption on like a resume, and as soon as they come on the screen and you see them, one assumption comes in your head anyway. Like that's just how unconscious bias works. And you ask a question or two looking for one type of answer and they answer another way. You can start to turn on them really quick. Or a couple minutes, you can make this person's great. It is an interviewer's job to make sure you are asking all of the things you need and digging in and finding this stuff out. We hired someone recently who
had a lot of character.
Well, of course. I knew 1 minute in I was going to hire them. But honestly, like halfway through the first interview, I thought I was going to reject. I was like, I like this person, but I don't think they're what I'm looking for. But I kept asking questions and I kept digging deeper. And then we got to the stuff that they just like didn't say right away, that like took them longer to get to. And they needed a little bit more prodding to get to it. And I was like, oh, you have said and sort of done all these things that I really need. I moved them forward and they wound up like crushing each interview step after that. And it's just sort of like, if I had that kind of mentality of people who try to make up their minds in 5 to 10 minutes, when I hired this person.
Well, look, like kind of going back to that previous topic with the AI phone screener, like I don't know, the argument for these AI phone screeners is this guy right here. In all fairness, because the problem is, it's like if you're not actually like, if you don't have a hiring scorecard, if you don't actually have like a process and an understanding of why you're even asking the questions, then how are you even making a true evaluation, right? If you're not giving people a shot. And one thing I noticed with these AI tools is, like, I took one of these interviews, and what it actually does is if you don't answer the question in the right way, it will prompt you to ask, it will kind of ask you like, oh, can you expand on this, or can you clarify this, or actually I was looking for this. And sometimes I wonder how many recruiters are actually doing that. Like how many human recruiters would actually go, hey, actually, great answer there, but I was actually looking for this information. And so, if you got Dan's running around there who are just going,
Mhm.
hey, 5-minute interview. Oh, you're not awesome. I'm not going to hire you.
Yeah.
Um, these tools are actually could be helpful because they give everybody that fair shot. But again, guys, this is why it's so important. When you're on LinkedIn, you cannot look at just like the LinkedIn top voice and assume that this person is putting out good content. And then also just click on the profile of the company, because if you go to this guy's company, he doesn't even have he's not doing that much hiring. And likely his team is just him and maybe two other people. And so it's really important, guys, when you listen to or you see this content, like you just got to do your due diligence. And luckily, you have people like Amy. You got people like Matt who will just call people out when we see this stuff, because it's just, some of this stuff is just ridiculous.
I'm curious. He lists himself as a tech career coach. And I'm curious if this is how he coaches his candidates too. So people pay him for 5 minutes worth of interview prep, like just sort of like, no, just here's how you prove you're awesome in 5 minutes by answering this. And there's literally nothing else you have to do to get the job. You're right about recruiters who don't dig deeper. A huge problem in hiring is untrained interviewers, untrained recruiters, untrained hiring managers. Untrained managers is like a giant, corporation problem to begin with. And yeah, there are companies out there that try and fix this. There's a lot of like expert interviewers is a account I love on TikTok and Instagram.
I love that account
The
too.
two of them, and like, because I get that a lot of people say, why are you always making content for job seekers? Like, you need to be helping interviewers. And you're right. And there are companies and there are accounts like that that do try to work with companies as well.
And
But
then
at the
there's
same
tools
time,
like MetaView, Brighthire, Pillar, like
mhm,
tools that like transcribe and like give everybody fair interviews, and you can like actually assess what's going on in interviews. Those are great tools.
yeah, we need more of that for sure. And one of the issues with companies sort of slashing their talent acquisition budgets is you're getting rid of the people who used to do that for everybody and replacing them with either like just an AI tool or a really junior person or people who weren't sort of as good, right? Like a good recruiter like me does so much more than just like interviewing people. All right. I set fair interview processes and I meet with everybody and we establish here's what's going to happen. And I understand that doesn't happen at most companies, and that's like a really big problem.
Yeah.
But it's mentalities like this that create the need for that.
Yeah, and I mean, and when you again, and I don't actually want to bash Dan too much more, but it's just like I get it as like a CTO, like you probably have a different mindset even with like interviews, and hey, you're an executive, right? So you are actually the one making the decisions, and you can make whatever decisions you want. It's just from like a universal perspective. It's like it's sad to me that there are actual like leaders in companies that have these types of mentalities, because it's like then when you look at like the company and it's just everybody is the same, you're like, oh, I wonder why you aren't hiring people who have non-traditional paths or are diverse or have different backgrounds. It's because like you're basing it on just like the 5-minute initial reaction. And I saw another post too like this recently where it was like it broke down all of the. I'm actually going to share this post here so we can see it, but it was a post by a recruiter basically talking about like the LinkedIn best practices with photos, with your LinkedIn photos. So I'm gonna pull this post up. Just give me a second here. But I think when I see stuff like this, it's just sad to me, and it just means that job seekers just kind of go through so much stuff, and then it's like they have judgment on the back end from people as well.
The other
It's
dangerous thing with somebody like that, while you pull this up too, is like someone like that also probably fires you just as quickly
very much.
because they don't know enough. They hired you just off this instinct of liking you in 5 minutes. And it's just going to take like a little bit of seeing you work to realize you work in a way they don't like and like you're done.
100%. Yeah, they probably have that mentality, like, what is it, like, fire people quickly. But
Yeah.
again, it's like when situations like that happen, I'm always like, man, you guys don't have a good hiring process, or you're not fully vetting people. This is why that happens, because you haven't taken the actual time to vet people in the right way. I don't know. I don't know if I have this post anymore. And this was a post that came across my feed through another agency owner. And so this is the post here. So, and again, this post is all about basically like what you shouldn't do on your LinkedIn profile. So let me play this. Managers can be. Again, this is
If you're looking for a job right
guys, have you ever wondered how absolutely petty recruiters and hiring managers can be? check out this post from a recruiter on LinkedIn that gives you a nice laundry list of things that your LinkedIn profile picture shouldn't have. Things like your spouse or your partner, things like your kids or animals. You're also not allowed to do selfies in a car, and you're not allowed any thirst traps. Now, I've hid the original post identity, but if you were to go to this post on LinkedIn, you will see a massive backlash with this post because so many people are saying things that are absolutely correct. Like, what does a profile picture have to do with how good I am at my job? And while I 100% agree with that sentiment, that a profile picture should never have anything to do with how good you are at your job, the truth is, hiring managers are extremely petty. And I have seen hiring managers kick people out because of their LinkedIn profile, and especially the LinkedIn profile picture. I've seen and heard hiring managers make comments a ton of time. My personal take is, if you're judging my profile picture as my ability to get my job done, I don't want to work for you anyway. But I do actually think it's helpful to know as a job seeker how some hiring managers can do these things. And so, as much as I hate pretty much everything about this post, there is a side to it that is true, because hiring managers and recruiters are super petty and they do not make things easy for job seekers. Guys, have you ever wondered how absolutely petty recruiters and hiring managers can be? Yeah. So curious. I kind of gave my take on there at the end there. Thoughts on this? Like, like, because this person did receive a lot of backlash and people were going at them. But like, is there some truth to this? Like, it's kind of like the open to work thing. Like, is there some truth to the fact that, like, if you have a bad LinkedIn photo, it can work against you? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, this is one of those things where people want there to be a universal answer. And this is the kind of things that like it makes great social media, right? Like you made your post and it's the kind of post that like an Amy Miller, whoever else will sort of like love to dive in and be like, absolutely no way, like do whatever you want. But like let's also be real. And you talk about that like in yours. Like, yeah, to some people that is gonna matter. And there's one of those things where like, you have to make that decision. Do you not care? Do you want to work for someone like me who doesn't give a shit, like what's in your LinkedIn profile? Or do you want to just go with the standard, safest way and know that it like won't rule you out to some people? A safe LinkedIn photo is not going to like chase anyone away. Anything you do past there, yes, there are people you could upset.
So I just remember this one hiring manager one time, like someone had a pet in their profile picture, and I think it was a pet of that, or a picture of that dog, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm a cat person," and they moved on.
Yeah, like us, like that stuff exists, and we can say it shouldn't. And as recruiters, like we can constantly talk about like, don't do this and tell hiring managers not to act like that, but like they do. And I've worked with executives who, as much as I say not to, right? And we can the thank you notes or pictures or any of this stuff people argue about, right? I've worked with plenty of executives who just like someone better because they send a thank you note. And I can say, don't let that be the deciding factor, but it's still in their head. Like,
I think one of the things I really appreciated about your content. This was maybe a year ago. I remember you had like someone asked you about like cover letters, and obviously, I think there was a recruiter from Facebook who was like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but we don't read cover letters. And I remember you putting in one of your posts, you were like, guys, I hate to be like the unpopular person here, but like, do you just do the cover letter? And I
just
think you
write
said that
it.
the same thing with the thank you notes. You were like, guys, I'm not here to say like I agree with this or don't agree, but like just do it. Like some of these things, somebody's do these things because you just never know like when it matters, right? And do you think like this recruiter who posted this, they literally, like, I mean, people were making other posts like dragging them through the mud in our classic recruiter, like, let's just witch hunt type thing. Do you think it's deserved, like, or do you think like if you communicate something like that, maybe you need to do it in like a little bit less of a kind of, the tone of the post was like a little bit, I don't
Yeah.
know, like, is there a tone you need to have, I guess, when you're putting out posts?
That's the hard part about content on the internet, right? You have like two choices, which is sort of hedge and talk a little less extreme and a little bit more realistic, or go get a lot of views. And it's really hard to do both, right? That's a struggle I have is, we talked at the beginning, you were like, you still go back to like some clickbait stuff. Like sometimes I wish I did more. I feel like I can't because I've just like built so much and like I never do that. But like sometimes I want to because like that's what like I know I like that'll help. I think that like it's the same idea, right? So that to me, the answer is like, hey, there are managers who don't like this stuff. You are potentially hurting your chances with these managers. Do I think it's silly that they care about that? The person who says I'm a dog person and moved on, or I'm a cat person and moved on. So I think that's stupid. Yes, but it's a thing that can happen. It's up to you to decide, like, if you want to work for people who think that way or not. But if I wrote that post, it wouldn't get any views or reactions or anything like that. So yeah, my tone would be the like, yeah, this stuff can matter. Just like my tone with, yeah, cover letters are stupid. Where I work, we don't ask for them. It's not even on the application to send one. But if someone is asking for one, I can't tell you if they're going to read it or not, but they might, and it might help you. And if the goal is to get a job, I'm going to tell you it might help you to send that.
Yeah, it's the amount of nuance and the amount of like no right answers in our industry. It's really insane. Look, we're at time here. I usually have the podcast go right around like 40 to 45 minutes. I feel like we could just bash every LinkedIn post we ever see and just have a ton
Easily.
of fun. I feel like we could just do a whole podcast or just like
Oh, for
LinkedIn
sure.
crap content. And probably half of it would be mine. But what do you advise like people finding out about you? What's the best place for people to reach out to you? Like where you and just so you guys know, like Mike is not just like a LinkedIn creator. I mean, Mike has huge following on TikTok, huge following on Instagram. You know, he's got been featured in the news. Like, you know, Mike's verified. Like he's been his content's been shared thousands and thousands of times, viewed millions of times. So he's not just like a one platform guy. Obviously, has a podcast as well. So where would you advise people to try and get a hold of you or reach out to you, or where's your kind of best platform for people to follow?
If you want to follow me, TikTok or Instagram is The Realistic Recruiter. You can find me on LinkedIn just using my name. I'm on there. You know, my LinkedIn content is obviously a little bit different. Mike Peditto. My LinkedIn content is obviously a little bit different. But you'll see me talk on LinkedIn a little bit more about like ways to improve hiring and careers. Where on TikTok and Instagram, it's a lot more advice for like individual people.
Yeah.
No companies are looking for me on TikTok. So it's a lot more aimed at people. LinkedIn is a lot more sort of aimed at trying to help careers. Of course, you can check out the Corporate Pizza Party podcast. But,
Yeah.
you know, if you're listening to this podcast, you'll probably like that one too. But yeah, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn are the main places to find me right now.
And then real quickly too, you're working for Teal. So just give us like the 2 minute, whatever, the 30-second pitch for Teal. Like what is Teal? What's your guys' mission?
Teal's mission is to, I'm going to sound like a corporate like parent here, but I believe it. It's why I care. Teal's mission is to help job seekers take control back of their career, ultimately. Right now, Teal is most known for our job searching tools. Teal, wants to continue to be a career resource in a lot of ways. Currently, Teal has a free job tracker that can help you with some networking tools, a resume building tool, some things to help you make a resume, make job searching a little bit better, more in the work soon to continue to be sort of a career resource. But also, yeah, we are a company that does not take sponsored money from companies. We have a job board on Teal's website where there are no sponsored posts and you can filter by things that matter to you. We are very much one of the few corporate companies in this job searching space that is not made for the company's benefit, but for individual benefit.
I love it. And look, guys, what I love about Mike's story as well is, if any of you guys who don't follow or know Mike, he's laid off a couple times, but started creating content, kind of documenting like even the job search as well, which is why one of the big reasons I think your content resonated so much with people, because they were like, oh, this guy's going through the exact same thing as me. But you started working with Teal, I think, a couple of years ago even. And so it's just been so cool to see like kind of like how content even just like brought you to a company that you actually care about and that has such a great mission. So big shout out to Dave Fano as well, the CEO over there, and the whole team. I mean, I love the Teal team. So check out Teal if you haven't. We'll put the links in, and then we'll put all the links to Mike's social. Mike, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to do this, and I can't wait for. We still haven't met in real life, but at RecFest.
For those who know, Joe and I live about 10 or 15 minutes from each other, and for a year and a half have managed not to meet yet.
But look, we also both have like how old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Yeah. So I've got 5, 3, and a couple months. So when your dad's with young kids, man, it's no joke. You know that. So recruiting is probably easier than that. But
yes,
guys, this is another episode of Recruiting is No Joke. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We'll put all the links in the show notes here so people can check you out. And guys, we will be back next week with another show. If you're interested in being a guest, or you're interested in sponsoring the show, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to www.therealistrecruiter.com. Fill out a form on there. You can subscribe to the podcast as well. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Mike, thank you so much again. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.